Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. I've got a really great Figured Out Baseball podcast for you today. We're being joined in the podcast by Tony Schifano. He's the head coach at San Francisco State, an NCAA Division II team in California. I'll give you a quick background on Coach Schifano before we get into questions with him. He is a native of Orange, California. He played collegiately at UC Davis, which at the time was an NCAA Division II team. While at UC Davis, he was a three-time All-Conference player. His 1995 team advanced to the NCAA College World Series. He graduated from UC Davis in 1997, the same year that he signed as an undrafted free agent with the Florida Marlins. In his playing career, he made it as high as AAA with the Houston Astros. And then began his coaching career. From 2004 till 2007, he was an assistant coach at Los Gatos High School in California. Then from the springs of 2008 through 2015, he was an assistant coach and recruiting coordinator at UC Davis, his alma mater, but by that time they had transitioned to Division I. While at UC Davis, he ran the team's offense and coached the outfielders as well as being the recruiting coordinator. The 2008 UC Davis team went to the NCAA Regional. In 2010, Coach Schifano was actually inducted into the UC Davis Hall of Fame. His 2015 team at UC Davis won 30 games for only the second time since the school had transitioned to Division I. He was then hired in July of 2015 to be the head coach at San Francisco State. In 2016, his first season as the head coach, the team won the most games in program history since 2004. In 2018, the team went to the conference tournament for the first time ever. The 2019 team won the most games again since 2004 and ranked as high as number 17 in the national polls. 2020, they were off to a hot start. They started 14-8 before the season was cut short due to COVID-19. Coach Schifano, I really appreciate you spending some time with us here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that nice introduction.
Absolutely. And if you listen to any podcast on the website, I'd like to start with something that stands out from the bio. And to me, what stands out is obviously you had your playing career, but then you went from being a high school coach to being a Division I assistant coach. And that's not something that a lot of guys can do. Obviously, you had ties there since it was your alma mater. But can you kind of take us through what happened there to transition to being a Division I assistant coach in your first college job?
Yeah, absolutely. I was extremely blessed. You know, a lot of young coaches have to go through the ranks of director of operations, volunteer coach, and pay their dues. And you know, I kind of believe I paid my dues as a minor leaguer, but it's a little bit different being on the road recruiting and setting up camps in the summer and doing all that different stuff. So it was a crash course for me. I was hired in the fall of I should say I was interviewed in the fall of 07 because the assistant coach left for St. Mary's College. And so UC Davis was without a second assistant coach. And there was a great group of names on the list that I knew that he interviewed. And, you know, having ties to UC Davis definitely helped. You know, we wanted to strengthen our alumni base and you know, maybe, you know, bring some young energy into the program. And I think I fit that mold for them. And like when I say crash course, I mean crash course, because when I got hired in 08 in January officially, you're still in a quiet period, so you can't get out and recruit. And we're not practicing during that time, so it was a lot of office work, asking questions, calling coaches around the West Coast that I had played ball with growing up, and just trying to get an idea what was expected come March when we could recruit and we're in the middle of our season. So, you know, we had an amazing team that year. I think we had 8 players drafted from that 08 team that went to the regionals. And, you know, obviously I did not recruit any one of those young men. And I was just along for the ride that first year learning. And I couldn't have been more blessed to walk into a program that was set up to win. And we went to the Stanford Regional, and we beat Stanford on Friday night. It was one of the biggest wins in UC Davis history. And unfortunately, we got knocked out of the tournament a couple days later. But, you know, reality sets in. 8 guys are drafted. You're out recruiting in the summer, rebuilding the program. And I think the following year, we won 20 games. And we had to rebuild. And I wouldn't have changed anything, to be honest with you. You know, I learned what it took to recruit and build from the ground up. I looked at that team that we had at 08 and how strong it was up the middle, and that was my goal in recruiting the next next 3 to 4 years. And like you mentioned, I think by year 14 and 15, we had built a strong nucleus, and we were back up to winning 30 games. And I was able to, throw that on the resume and garner some interest from some programs on the West Coast, and San Francisco State being one of them. And it's all worked out really well.
Why was building a team and making the team strong up the middle? You hear that a lot, and just for people that are listening to this, that are curious as to why that is sort of a trend or a thing that a lot of teams end up doing. Why, as a recruiter and now as a head coach, is that important for you when building a program? Why start up the middle?
Yeah, for me, it starts obviously on the mound. You're gonna put a bunch of money and time and effort into the guys that are pitching in your rotation. But for me, the most important position is the catching position, and I've held that belief ever since I was a young player going through the minor leagues. A lot of my coaches in the minor leagues were catchers, and you look at the big leagues, a lot of big league manager former catchers. And there's something about them being behind the plate, seeing the field, having a feel for the pitching staff and the flow and the rhythm of the ball game. And I look back now, 13 years of coaching, 8 at UC Davis and 5 at SF State. And I look back, I could name the top 5 teams from those 13 years or the top 6 teams. And every single one of those years, we had a top all-conference catcher. That OV team had a third-rounder that played for the Marlins and Jake Jeffries. And, we had that 2015 team at UC Davis when you alluded to winning 30-plus games. Isaac Silva had drafted by the Angels. And, here at SF State, we went to the conference tournament for the first time back-to-back years, and we had an all-conference catcher in Jason Hare. And I don't think it's a coincidence. It's something about that position that, like I said, the rhythm and the flow of the game, and you are going to put a lot of money into your pitching staff, but if they don't have somebody that they trust and believe and that can throw to, you're not going to get their full potential.
When recruiting catchers or developing catchers, what do you think are some of the most important traits? What makes a catcher really elite in your eyes?
Absolutely, and I don't believe it's the stopwatch. Everybody pulls out their stopwatch at the showcases for the catchers. Their pop times a 1.9 or 2.0 or 2.1. I get the emails from recruits. Hey coach, this young man his pop time's 1.85, and it doesn't do a lot for me. Of course, it shows quick transfer, strong arm strength, but for me, it's leadership behind the dish. It's a guy that receives the ball extremely well, walks very well. He's athletic. He's versatile. Could care less what his batting average is. He's able to separate 4 at-bats and understand that what he does with 100 pitches, 125 pitches, receiving them in the ball game, and the psyche of his pitchers and relievers coming into the game, and knowing the lineup and the scouting reports. All that stuff is so much more important than a pop time to me. And I couldn't tell you what Jake Jeffries and Isaac Silva and Jason Hare's all conference catchers pop times were, but I can tell you that every single one of the pitchers loved throwing to them, loved their leadership and their toughness behind the plate. So if I can narrow it down to 3 things, I'd say the ability to lead, toughness, and the ability to receive the baseball.
Can you talk about that leadership quality a little bit? I know that catchers, I think most people familiar with the game look at the catching position as one of the leadership positions on the team. But why is it so important that guy is the leader, or is one of your leaders, as opposed to letting your shortstop be a leader, or your best hitter on your team, regardless of what he plays? Why is it so important to have that leadership quality behind the plate?
Yeah, absolutely. Because he's the one guy that everybody's looking at on the field. You have 8. You include the pitcher. You have 8 position players on the field, and they're all staring at the catcher. And it's where it starts. I know the ball's on the mound, and they say it starts with the pitcher's hand, but everything starts with the catcher. His signs, when he goes to the mound to talk to the pitcher. I will tell you, I love it when we get to a point where the the catchers don't have to look in the dugout for signs, and we can trust them to call their own game. And it's amazing the rhythm and the flow of the game when we have guys that are able to do that. And our guys feed off that. It's when I say leadership, it's not so much yelling and screaming and telling guys to get in the right position or yelling at his pitcher to throw strikes. None of that. It's a guy on third base, ninth inning, and it's an 0-2 count, and it's a one-run game, and that pitcher knows he can throw that splitting in the third because he knows the catcher is going to do everything he can to block that pitch. And 8 guys watching that's leadership right there in a nutshell. He doesn't need to say anything. He just needs to bury his chin, block that pitch, and give the trust to the other 15 guys on the mound when they come to the game that they can throw that pitch where they need to.
So when you're recruiting catchers, are you recruiting those tools over others, just say an offensive tool? Like, are you more apt to recruit a catcher who has the leadership qualities and is a good defender, is a good blocker, somebody that you feel like has a feel for the game, so at some point in his career he'll be able to call his own game? Are those things your primary tools for behind the plate? And if so, how much where do you kind of draw the line offensively? How good does that guy have to be if he's a plus defender? How good offensively does he have to be? Obviously, he's got to hit a little bit to stay in the lineup at least, right? But how much offense are you willing to sacrifice for those other tools that you feel like make up are the most important at the catching position?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. It's a fine line. I mean, there's some guys in our conference that are basically outs at the plate, but they absolutely shut down the running game. And you're basically stationary, and it forces me as an offensive coach to sacrifice Buck more than I want him because we like to run. But if you have that guy that shuts down everything, then it shortens the lineup too. Like you said, if the guy can't hit, how much do you put emphasis on the defense over that? I look for a little bit of a balance, to be honest with you. We play 50 games in a season, 4-game weekends. So we're gonna, my guy is not gonna catch all 4 games every weekend. He's gonna be worn out by the end of the season. So, I'll sacrifice a little bit of defense to bring in another catcher, a second, third string catcher that can bang the ball around the field a little bit, and maybe that guy will DH, a couple games and keep his bat in the lineup. I look for a little versatility. I mentioned athleticism earlier. I want a guy that maybe if he can catch, and if he's not catching that particular day, he can play first base, or I can put him in left field just to get his bat from the lineup. So, I don't look for just defense only in every one of my catchers. I look for a little bit of a variety. Now, if you find that guy that can do both, that's your special player, and we're all going after that guy.
I like that. And the athleticism behind the plate, as a recruiting coordinator, when in my time as a recruiting coordinator, I'd love to see athletic guys behind the plate. I didn't want to recruit that guy who, could receive well, could throw pretty well, but just was very slow and heavy on his feet behind the plate. But I'd like to just kind of ask you, it's maybe a strange question, but how do you, when you're recruiting someone, can you define athleticism? And I'm asking this for the people that might be listening to this, a player or a parent. Maybe the kid or a parent thinks, hey, my kid's athletic, or a kid thinks I'm a pretty good athlete behind the plate. But I don't know that people always know exactly how to define that. Can you define it? I know it's maybe, again, a weird question, but can you define athleticism, especially behind the plate, and what that means for you, kind of things that you're looking for that you would see the catcher do these things and say, hey, he's a pretty good athlete back there?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And I ask my recruiting coordinator all the time, did you see athleticism in his footwork and his body? And I don't think it's a black and white answer. Like, if a catcher does one thing or an athlete does one thing, it makes him athletic. But I trust my eyes, to be honest with you, and I'm staring at their footwork. I'm staring at the way they block, how they move side to side. And that's pretty much it. It's either a slow action athlete or a fast, quick twitch athlete is kind of what I'll write in my notes. We hold camps like every other college program, and we'll do the hitting first, of course, and guys will bang the ball out about him, and I'll say, okay, let's wait and see if he shows athleticism during his defensive drills, because that's when you see it, his defensive drills. We put all of our catchers in our camps through a series of blocking drills. And I guess the best way to answer your question is the way they block, because that's the quick reactions. Leaving your feet and getting down and getting your chest down. These big old donkeys that can hammer the ball 420 feet. Sometimes they can't, block a slider when they know it's coming down and away. So, it's a tough question to answer, because it's more than just what I see with my eyes, and it's not your 660 time or things of that nature. I will tell you this though: the catchers I've recruited in the past, I'm very adamant about wanting to know if they play other sports. If they play basketball, soccer, wrestling, football, any kind of other sport where it shows me that they do have some athleticism in their footwork and their agility, and that always helps as well.
I just I tweeted about that maybe in the last week. I read another tweet and like either responded to that or retweeted it with a comment or whatever, and just kind of said, on these podcasts that I've had, every single coach that we've talked about recruiting, in one way or another we get into recruiting guys that play multiple sports, every single coach I've ever talked to has said, I like recruiting guys that play multiple sports, and I've never had one coach on here that has said, I prefer the guy that plays baseball, nothing but baseball. It's amazing. Obviously that was an unprompted comment from you, and it's just amazing how consistent coaches are with that. But yet you still see so many guys that play baseball, 9 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year, take a couple months off to lift or recuperate, and then back to baseball. But yet that's not what necessarily coaches want. If we can kind of stick on that for a minute, what would you say to someone who's listening to this who feels like they need to play all year round, A, to be seen, and B, to not fall behind their competition? Because it's a natural thing, I think, and I think people play baseball year round with the right intentions. I think they do it because they want to be the best they can be, and they want to see how far they can go in baseball, and they want to get the best college offer or the best pro opportunity that they can. But at the same time, again, all of you college coaches are saying, I like the guy that plays multiple sports. So for the family that's listening to this that feels like they have to play year-round, number one, again, to be seen by as many people as they can, number two, to get as much training in as they can, and number three, to not fall behind competition, because the guy next to you that you're competing on, whether it's on your local travel team or like maybe there's another guy in your conference who you're kind of competing with in a way to sort of keep up with them, and that person's playing year-round, and I think kids can kind of naturally feel like, well, if I play basketball or I play football, that's a couple months away from baseball, that this other guy's continuing to play baseball, and he's going to pass me up while I'm doing something different. And I think that those are legitimate concerns that people that end up playing year-round have. What would your response to that be as a college coach, just realizing that, kids don't want to pass up potential opportunities, and again, I think they're playing for the right reasons, but from your coaching perspective, it's not necessarily the best thing. How would you respond to a family that is in that situation right now?
Yeah, it's a dilemma right now in the country, right? The way I would, there's a lot of different things I'd say about that. One thing is college recruiting these days. There's so many dead periods and quiet periods that we can't even go out and see your kids play. And, I encourage the kids during those times to do other sports, to play basketball, whether it's recreational. It doesn't have to be organized. It's, whether it's, playing soccer, working on your footwork, things of that nature. But what it teaches, when you play another sport, it teaches you, it continues to teach you to compete. Baseball can be a slow sport at times, right? And we're all competing. But when you're playing basketball and it's such a fast pace, you have to compete on the spot, and it's nonstop. And it also teaches you when you're standing on that free throw line, it's just you and that basket. There's something there where you have to. It's a psychological thing where it's going to help you down the road in baseball. When so we're not on the road able to see your players. And I don't know how many coaches I know I don't do it, but I have never made an offer based on just video, of one at bat in an Arizona Winter League that sent to me. I have to see a young man play live and to trust and to see every aspect of him during the game. And then it's our body. We have so many. We only have so many throws in our arm, and it's good to rest and to get in the weight room. And I tell a lot of our campers, if you're not interested in playing other sports, and if you're just not a basketball player, if you're not a soccer player, not a football player, invest that money that instead of going to Arizona for the 14th time in a calendar year for a tournament or for your 12th different showcase, invest that money in a strength training program and give yourself the best, the most ability to build strength and quickness and do it the right way. When I was a young player, I was picking up dumbbells and doing curls and no idea what I was doing. I wish I had somebody teaching me the right way to gain strength and the right places to gain strength. And I look back and unfortunately I didn't know what I didn't invest my money in that. But that's the advice I can give parents is give your kids a chance to play other sports and learn how to compete. Understand that college coaches cannot be out recruiting all the time to see your kids play, and invest in strength training to when we are able to see you're at your best, you're strongest, you're most fit, and it gives that will give your son the best opportunity to gain a scholarship.
Love that. Great perspective. And, just to address a couple of things there, the strength programs, if you're listening to this and you're interested in strength programs and getting stronger, but you don't have a plan if you go to the gym and you can't or don't want to pay for a personal trainer, at figureitoutbaseball.com, there are 3 different college strength coaches who have written out programs for players to use, and they're different. They're all different in a way. Some of them, if you have a full weight room and you're more of an advanced athlete in the weight room, then there are programs for you. If you're a beginner, have never used weights before, just want to do some body weight stuff as a younger kid, there are programs for you there as well. And again, there are full downloadable programs. As a high school coach, I was a high school head coach for 1 season before Figured Out Baseball, before the website launched, and I didn't have time to do it after that. But after I left college ball, I was a head coach in high school for 2 falls and a spring. And as a high school coach, you're all of a sudden the strength coach as well, and as well as the hitting coach, pitching coach, infield coach, outfield coach, right? You're everything. And at that time, luckily I had old strength programs from when I coached in college to draw on. But for high school coaches out there as well that aren't sure or have to make up their own strength program, or all they have is a football strength program, I think it's a great resource as well. But to go back to your answer, Coach, about what kids should be doing, there are so many benefits from every other sport that you hear coaches talk about all the time. You talked about some of the benefits of being on a basketball team. Another thing about it being in a basketball team is you don't have time necessarily to think about your last offer, right? As a hitter, you're out and you have probably 2 to 3 innings to think about that. You have time on defense to potentially think about that. In basketball, you're going from one play to the next, and you don't have time to think about it, and I think it helps to teach kids that skill. Obviously, you have footwork and hand-eye coordination stuff with basketball. As a soccer player, I don't know. I know that as growing up as a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, like Jack Wilson was a really good shortstop for the Pirates for quite a while, and he attributed his footwork to playing soccer as a kid. Coaches comment all the time about football players about how they don't need to be afraid to be tough on or to kind of yell at a football player, because you kind of know that if a guy played high school football, he's been yelled at before, and he's come back from it, and he's okay. He's not going to fold under, not going to fold if you get tough with him or have some strong words for him or whatever. And there's just so many benefits from playing all these sports, and I'm sure you see that as a head coach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one other thing I'll add to it is, it's getting more and more difficult to play professional baseball these days. Everybody saw that the Major League Draft got cut to 5 rounds this year. Now, that's obviously because of COVID. But I know that they've been looking for years to cut the draft down from 40 rounds to 20. And who knows, so it's a lesser and lesser chance now to get drafted. So you have to be extremely athletic right now to get attention from scouts. And the minor leagues, they're cutting minor league teams left and right. So the point being is it's getting more and more difficult to become a professional athlete. And you got to give yourself every opportunity to gain strength and gain quickness. And, going to showcases all year round, you're just going to tear your body apart. You have to take a break. You have to build your body back up the correct way. And, one thing we didn't mention is the diet. You can get the weight room as much as possible, but if you're not eating correctly, you're not putting what you need to in your body, you're not going to maximize your potential. And the last thing I'll say, Jeff, is, I bet if we did a poll of all the big leaguers this year, how many guys played another sport when they were growing up, I would assume it's going to be close to 75 to 80%. I can't imagine that no more than 20% of the big leaguers just played baseball only growing up.
I would have to agree. And I know that at some point in the past, and God knows when it was or who tweeted it, but again, to kind of refer to Twitter, I know that I've seen something before about, it might have been playoff, of all the guys that were in the playoffs, X number of guys played multiple sports in high school. Somewhere along the lines I saw it, and it was a big number. And it made it, and it got some legs on Twitter, kind of like what you, just to say what you just said, like, hey guys, this is real. Like, as a young kid, these big leaguers played multiple sports. And we're not talking about guys that grew up in the 80s and 90s here. I mean, we're talking about, 25-year-olds that were in high school within the last 10 years that played multiple sports. So yes, it's certainly something. And when you hear guys like yourself and other current college coaches that are still saying that, I'd rather recruit a multi-sport guy, it's hard to deny that that's a great way to go.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you just mentioned, well, a few minutes ago now, that your team, if you have a shutdown catcher on the other team, you guys will sack bunt more than maybe you'd like to, and that you also like to run. And those are two things that that seem to be dying at certain levels of baseball, the sack bunt. And you have a lot of people that are pushing for the extinction of the sack bunt. Stolen bases, at least at the major league level, it seems like really only if it's a 100% sure thing, because I don't know, the pitcher's extremely slow to the plate or whatever it may be, or unless you're a guy that has a chance to steal 40 plus bases in a year, it's like that nobody runs anymore. There's very little action in a major league game. But at your level, can you kind of talk about at your level why you still believe in the sack bunt and what situations, and then maybe we can get to stolen bases after that. But at what points do you utilize the sack bunt in your offense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been influenced by some great coaches over the years. I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up going to Angel games, but I also grew up going to Cal State Fullerton games. And the great Augie Garrido, unfortunately he passed away a few years ago, but I idolized him growing up and how he coached and managed a ball game. And he played for a run and inning. He truly believed if the leadoff guy got on, no matter who was coming up next, you run him over, and you put that pressure on the defense. And if you could, and he built his teams on pitching and defense, and if they could get 3 or 4 of those runs across a game, they were going to win 40 games a year, which they did, and multiple national championships. And he did that in Southern California, which is a hotbed for baseball players. And then later on in my career, there was no value in it in pro ball. We didn't bunt that much in pro ball, so I kind of, got away from it. But then when I got back into coaching, there's a coach. He's at the University of Washington right now, Lindsey Meggs, and he was the head coach at Chico State when I played at UC Davis. And he believed in the sack bunt, and I remember as a player always trying to defend it and always feeling pressure that runners in scoring position came like every other inning. And I just remember that as a defensive player. And years later, I'm at UC Davis coaching, and we're playing University of Washington, and it's probably the 7th inning, and we're up maybe 4 runs, and they have a guy or 2 on. I think we're up maybe 5 runs, and they got 2 guys on and nobody out, and they're 3 hitter up. And they send sack bunted him over, the two guys over. And I remember our dugout going, what are they doing? You know, they're down 5 in the 7th inning. How did they not let their 3-hitter hit here? But all he was doing was putting his team in a position to either tie or win the game later in the game. And so they got 2 guys over. They sit from the 4-hitter. Now they're only down 3. They tacked on a run in the 8th, and then the 9th inning they got the tying and the winning runs on base. But I remember being across the dugout, across the field, and thinking, God, that is smart baseball right there. And I'm gonna always use that and remember in the back of my head. And I remember my first year at SS State, we were down 5 in the 7th inning, got a couple guys on base, and I sacked them over. And I remember hearing some rumblings in our dugout, some of the fans, like, what is he doing? but what it does is, and I'll tell you what it does, it teaches every single player in your team that humility. It teaches that nobody is above anybody in the lineup, and it teaches sacrifice. And when you start to see success in your team, and they see what you believe in as a coach, and then you do start seeing success, then they start believing it, and they start getting behind each other, and they start pushing each other to get their bunts down in practice, to get their bunts down in BP. Now, we don't run the same offense that Augie Garrido ran in the 80s. I believe in the sack bunt. I believe in the value of the threat of a bunt, but I allow our guys to swing the bats probably early in the game, the first 5-6 innings, but they have to have the ability late in the game to get a big bunt down. And I always tell our guys, we're going to recruit pitching, we're going to recruit defense, which means we're going to be in every game, a majority of the games. It's going to be close games, and that bunt late in the game is going to make a difference. I think between winning a conference, big conference game or a conference weekend or even a conference tournament, I will tell you this, it's not just a sack bunt too, Jeff. It's the ability to squeeze, the ability to safety squeeze, the ability to drag and push. And now it just opens up your entire offense. My first 2-3 years at SS State, we bunted a lot. And I'll tell you what, the last 2-3 years, the scattering reports are getting around. As you remember as a college coach, it's all about scattering reports, right? And it's in that little section on the bottom of the scattering report says team tendencies. And I guarantee SS State's team tendencies across the board says loves to bunt, look for the push, look for the drag. And what that does is it brings corners in, it opens up the field for our hitters, and it gets us more fastballs. And we've seen our teams the last 2 years, I've gone a little away from the bunting, and we have put up some big numbers offensively the last 2 years. And I really attribute it to, the success and the trust our guys had the first 2-3 years with the short game. But with regards to running, our guys, every single one of our guys have a green light. And unless I have a sign that cuts them off from running, specific situations where I don't want them to run, I'll shut them down. But I want them, every single one of my guys, to believe that I have the confidence they can steal a base. And we work on it quite a bit. Jumps at second base. I still believe third base is the easiest base to steal. Pitchers are they get in the routine, and they're creatures of habit, and they don't like the pick. They just want to get a sign and pitch, and I believe we will take advantage of that as much as we can. But we run like crazy to a fault sometimes, where I do have to tone it down a little bit. But I'll tell you, it's a long-winded answer, but I'll tell you one more thing that's really helped, and there's a lot of young coaches out there, is you got to take away the fear of getting thrown out. Too many coaches get upset when their players get thrown out, and now the effect of that is the player is now scared to run. So what I do in the fall is everybody has a green light. I don't put the stoplight on anybody in the fall. But if they get thrown out in inter squads, they go back to first base or back to second base, wherever they came from. And we don't treat it like there was an out. Whatever happened at the plate with the pitch, if it's a ball, it's a ball, and we do over. So now that player is going to go back to first base and say, okay, why did they get thrown out? not a big enough lead, my jump was slow, things of that nature. But instead of going back to the dugout and having the coach saying, why the hell did you run there? You can't get thrown out in this situation. Now they're back at first base. It's more of a positive thinking, okay, how could I have been how could I have stolen that base? And things of that nature. So I apologize for the long-winded answer, but hopefully that little nugget helps some coaches out there.
No, don't apologize at all. That's kind of what we're looking for. I mean, I want the in-depth answers. I want people to be able to learn from these podcasts. So I think those are great.
I mean, here's the thing. And I think too many coaches out there, and I was guilty of it early in my career, trying to be a cookie cutter coach. I want to have the lineup where the leadoff hitter is my fast guy. That's my two hitters, my punter. My 3, 4, 5 hitters are my big hitters. Recruit to the lineup that you believe in as a coach, and because that's what you're going to practice every day. And this past year, these past 2 years, I should say, I put my 2 best hitters in the one hole, and it just hit me. With 4 games on a weekend, that's 4 extra at bats for my best hitter. And instead of just putting maybe a little slap hitter that's getting on base 35% of the time, I put my big talkies there that can hit doubles and give them 4 extra shots in a weekend to drive some runs in. And I think you're seeing that across the board all around the country now, and with analytics and things of that nature. So young coaches out there, be you. Trust what you believe and recruit that way and coach them that way.
Coach, there are a lot of people out there losing their minds over your answers to this point. Because a lot of your answers are non-conventional, but like you said, you can't coach at a high level and be worried about what other people are thinking or coach like everybody else coaches. You can't be influenced by what other people want to do or say you should do. You've got to coach with what you believe in, and what you believe is ultimately going to win. And just to be dumb, on a simple side of things, you win by scoring 1 more run than the other team. You don't win by following any particular someone else's formula, right? You win by just finding some way or another to score 1 more run than they do, and however you do it is okay at the end of the day. So I love that. I think it's a great lesson for a lot of people.
Absolutely, Chuck. I was on a podcast recently with some great coaches. I was doing more listening than talking, and the great Jerry Weinstein, I'm sure you've heard of Jerry Weinstein. He coached at Sac City for 25, 30 years out in the West Coast, Sacramento City College, who was a powerhouse in the 80s and 90s. And he's now a professional coach, a catching guru. And it was funny, somebody on the podcast mentioned that you win with pitching and defense, and Coach Weinstein says, no, that's not right. You actually win with pitching and a great offense. you got to score runs. And I had never really heard anybody say that before. We all grew up pitching and defense, win championships. And he threw out that little nugget of good pitching and a great offense, win championships. So,
that's a debate that a lot of people would love to get in on, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a changing game. It's different than when you and I grew up. And I hear there's coaches out there that complain that kids have changed. And the game has changed, and they're slow to change as coaches. But here's the thing: I don't call it changing. I think it's just adapting. You're adapting to the times and adapting to these young men, and being open-minded. Like I mentioned, Lindsey Meggs, the head coach of Washington. I stole that from him. I'm going to bunt late in the game, down a lot of runs, and I was open-minded about that. And I watched Augie Garrido do what he did for so many years, and Larry Lee at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is, I think, one of the greatest hitting coaches in the country. And I go down there for about 2-3 days every summer, and I just pick his brain, and he's willing to give me all his drills, and I bring those drills back to SS State. And by no means do I think I have all the right answers, but I have my experience I build on, I take from, but I also am open-minded and try to learn as much as I can from other coaches. I think that's important for all young coaches out there.
And it's great to hear someone with your experience say that you're not afraid to admit that But by saying that, you're essentially saying, I'm willing to admit that there are things that I do that probably aren't perfect, and if I find a better way to do it, I'm going to do it. And I think a lot of guys they have too much pride to say that, or to really make adjustments in what they will do and how they're going to coach a team. But in your experience with your players, do you feel like if from one season to the next, you change something, you change how you do something, how you coach something, change a philosophy, add, subtract drills? Do you think that, from your experience, do players look at that and think, boy, he really didn't know what he was doing last year, and you kind of lose them that way? Or do you think players, just how they react, do they like the fact that you're willing to, to have that tough conversation with yourself, really, and adjust from year to year and try to get better? Like, what are honest player reactions to those type situations?
That's a fantastic segue, Jeff. And I was actually going to tell you about how important it is to listen to your players. And, we've had some success the last 3-4 years, and I truly believe it's because I've been open-minded and listened to my players more. Each year at the end of the season, I have at end of the season meetings, exit meetings with my players. But I also bring all my seniors in, and I ask them, how was your experience here? What could have been different? What could have been better? And don't worry about my feelings. Let me know. And it's been unbelievable to learn and hear how much they care about. Well, they care about the program and they want it to be better, but how much thought and perception they have on how the program can be better. And I'll give you an example. They were, I guess, the first couple of years, the guys were a little nervous to come to me about the music during BP. And I'm a big country fan and country music fan, so I always had country music, and I always thought it was the safest music. I don't want any cursive words, things of that nature.
Non-family friendly.
Adults. Right, exactly. It's always about, country, talking about your truck and your dog was the safest thing in the world, right? So, but it didn't bring the energy that they wanted. And, it took a couple of years where finally a couple seniors came up to me and said, "Hey, Coach, we talk about the music during BP. We made a demo. Can we play it today in practice?" And you know what? I'll tell you what. I now my Sirius radio, my Pandora has today's hits and hip hop. I absolutely love it, and I've learned some new dance moves. And they've tried to get me on TikTok, but that ain't happening. But I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what I've done, Jeff. I've instituted music at practice now. We have a 3-hour practice. There's probably music at least 2 to 2.5 hours of practice, and it's not very loud. We turn it up during batting practice, of course, but it's you can hear it in a very subtle manner. I make sure, like, when my coaches are coaching drills and stuff, that the music isn't, over their voices. But it's amazing when you're doing a bunt defense and you have a little bit of rhythm going with music, how that parallels the rhythm of the drill you're doing. And you'll see some guys kind of maybe move around their shoulders a little bit, and, at shortstop, and they hear the music, but they're focused on the drill, and it has been phenomenal. And that was a suggestion of one of my players. And then another suggestion was, "Hey, Coach, I know you want to take this program to the highest level possible, but I think to do that, our strength training program has to get better." And I took it to heart, and I invested my time and some money over the summer and 2 summers ago, and I learned as much as I could about strength training and diet and nutrition, and we instituted our program the last 2 years, and it's been phenomenal. The difference in the feedback from the players has been phenomenal. So yeah, you have to be open-minded and trust your players, because when you trust them, it's incredible the amount of trust and effort and competitive spirit they give you. And they know you trust and believe in them. And the last thing, Jeff, I'll tell you with the players, it's a word I've used quite a bit in the last few years, and it was a word that I had never really used with my players, but in conversations was I tell them I love them and how much I love them and how important they are to me. And I will tell you this, from 08 to 15 at UC Davis, I wasn't comfortable saying that, because I was only focused on being the best recruiter in the West Coast and seeing every player and trying to, get us back to the regionals. Instead of putting majority of my focus on the players that we had and the family that we were building. You grow and you learn as a coach. And there's no regret to, how I used to coach, because I think we all, learn and grow throughout our lives. But the last 3 to 4 years, using the word love has really, really brought our program closer and our players closer together, and there's been a lot more trust, and I think it's shown on the field of success.
That's really great insight, again, for young coaches. I really hope that they will take that to heart. If there's anything that I could go back and change about my recruiting career, because I left college baseball when I was 30, and I was a Division I recruiting coordinator at the time. And I know that I put a lot of effort and time and thought into, who was going to be on campus next year, 2 years, 3 years from now. And I wish that I had spent a little more time. Obviously, that was my job, was to kind of look at the future as a recruiting coordinator. But I wish that I had spent more time, developing relationships with the guys that were there. And I think that I probably, I could have done a better job with that. And I think that the players missed out on something there by having one coach on staff who wasn't always present. Now, there were times I missed games. I missed practices to go recruiting, and I thought that's what I had to do to be the best at the time and to see as many guys as I could. And I think that they understood that. But I wish that when I was there, I wish I had spent more time, instead of talking about their baseball life, I wish I had just spent more time talking about their personal life and trying to just get to know them a little bit better, instead of them, the baseball player, get to know who they were off the field. And I think that would have went a long way with guys. I don't know if that would have turned into more wins or not, but I think it would have turned into, better relationships. If I look back at my career now, I had the best relationships I ever had with players was when I was a Division I volunteer. Because as a Division I volunteer, you have the least amount of responsibility on the team, and you also spend a lot more time sort of in the trenches with players almost. Especially the one volunteer job I had was at Winthrop, and part of my gig there was I got paid by the maintenance staff on campus to maintain the baseball field. So that was, that was my primary job. I took care of the field. And there were a lot of days when a lot of players would come out and work on the field with me. And we would just be out there kind of as equals working on the field. And it wasn't like I was in a superior position to them. And I had a lot of really good relationships with that team. And then, but when I transitioned to be a recruiting coordinator, I felt like I didn't want to be like their friend. I didn't want them to look at me as a friend, because I felt like I had to treat it like a business, like a Moneyball situation where, like, you're not their friend, right? Because you might have to have a tough conversation with them someday or whatever it may be. So I did that on purpose. And looking back at that, I wish I had gone the other way and just allowed myself to be who I was and allow myself to have a relationship with players without worrying about how it might look. Because I was a young coach as well. I kind of started that as my first recruiting job. I was 23, and I took a recruiting job at a junior college. And at that time, I thought, like, I really need to separate myself because I'm so close in age. I want them to know that I am Coach Stanek and not just Jeff or whatever. And I kind of carried that with me when I was a recruiting coordinator. And I guess, again, I just wish that I had, if I could go back now, I would treat it differently. Regardless if I was a head coach or recruiting coordinator or a volunteer, I think I would treat it kind of the same way, where the relationships with players would trump everything else.
No, absolutely, Jeff. But it's like anything in life, right? If we go back to high school, there's things we change. If we go back to our 20s, there's things we change. And the important thing is to recognize it and learn and grow from it. And one thing I got a really fun little story for you. This Sunday I'm going to a wedding, and it's my closer from 4 years ago, and he was inherited into the program at SF State. When I got the job, he was already signed, and he was signed as a starting pitcher. And we butted heads the first year because I didn't think he was a starting pitcher. I didn't recruit him there, but he had a good fastball and a good slider, and that was it. I said, "You're a closer." you're going to be our closer for the next 2 years, and you're going to be an all-conference closer, I believe. And he ended up being an all-conference closer. But that first year we butted heads, and I was trying to be that tough coach that first year, and then that second year, I opened up to him and told how much I respected him and cared about him and loved him and as a human being, and he knew he wasn't going to go play pro ball, so our focus was, after this particular season, graduation, what was the next steps in his life, and he ended up going to grad school at SF State, the MBA program. I helped him get into the MBA program, and he just graduated from it, getting married this Sunday, and I'll be at the wedding. And for me, that's getting that invitation to the wedding was more special, honestly, than maybe the 10 games he saved when the 10 games we won that he pitched in. There'll be, I think there's going to be 6 to 8 other players there that were on that team, and it's going to be special to see those guys, and those are the things that are the most important things to me, and has I will say probably saved myself and my coaching career. And the last story I'll tell you is 5 years ago I recruited a young man out of the Bay Area to go to UC Davis. He was a lefty, and great pitcher. Unfortunately, I didn't get to coach him because I left that summer for SF State. So, but I recruited him for 2 years, signed him to Davis, and I just watched his career from afar. And I was at UC Davis. I was on campus for something about a year ago, and we ran into each other in the bookstore. And so I think I was buying a hat or something, and we sat there and talked for an hour about his career at UC Davis. He was getting ready to graduate, and he had mentioned to me that he wanted to be a chiropractor, and that was his lifelong dream, and he's going to be able to attain that now. And he was so thankful for bringing him to UC Davis and whatnot. Well, anyhow, fast forward, this past fall, I'm recruiting a young man out of the Bay Area, and his father is the chiropractor for the San Francisco Giants. And we created a great relationship during the recruiting process. Unfortunately, the young man chose another school, but I stayed in contact with the family, and I had mentioned to the chiropractor that I had this player 5 years ago, and he wants to be a chiropractor. And he said, Tony, give him my phone number, and I'll take him to lunch, and I'll get him all set up with his career. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing, the relationships, how it became full circle 5 years later. And I think I put them in contact with each other, and I think they were trying to have lunch around this, around the COVID-19 deal here with the restrictions in California right now. But at least they'll get together, and maybe this will be the start of a great career for them. But those are the kind of things that I marvel in, and I close my eyes at night. It makes me happy that I can be part of that.
That's amazing. That's such a great story, and that's, as I kind of get older, and I'm still fairly young, I guess, but as I get older, it becomes more and more apparent to me that you've got to do things for the right reason, and most of the time the right reason to do things is to focus on somebody else besides yourself, to make other people the focal point of everything that you're doing. And if you focus outwardly instead of inwardly, you're probably going to end up doing the right thing. Most of the time, you're probably going to end up creating great relationships without even necessarily setting out to do so. And I think you'll end up being invited to a lot of weddings and helping a lot of people start their careers. So I think there's a tremendous amount of insight there. So I definitely appreciate your perspective. This is Tony Schifano, everybody. He's the head coach at San Francisco State in Division II in California. Coach Schifano, this has been amazing. One of the more enjoyable podcasts I've done. This hour has flown by. I sincerely appreciate the time you've given, and just appreciate you taking part in the podcast.
Oh, it was fantastic, Jeff. I've been looking forward to being part of your program, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my stories. I can be long-winded at times, but hopefully there's a few nuggets in there that coaches or any that young players can gravitate towards. And I'll throw this out there. If any young coach or young player has a question or anything, my information's on our website. Feel free to reach out. shoot me an email, and I'd love to connect and answer any questions and help anybody I can. Thank you, Jeff.
This is awesome, man. If people didn't learn something from this podcast, they weren't paying enough attention. And I can verify that Coach Schifano will respond to you because he and I had no prior relationship. I sent him an email on a whim, and here we are on the podcast. And hopefully this is not the first and not the last time we have you as a part of Figure It Out. But again, Coach, want to thank you one last time, and best of luck to you and the team going forward.
You bet. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.